He's Tim.
And he's Harry.
And we're about to turn paper sideways.
You're listening to Turn Paper Sideways, the podcast where we talk about cardboard and rotating it 90 degrees.
We talk about all things Magic the Gathering, from current affairs to our favourite format, Commander. And this week we've got another deck tech, and this is the deck which I think is most unique in my collection. It's my Sidar Kondo of Jamuura deck.
Yeah. But before we get into that, too excitedly, because I'm excited and it's going to be really fun, let's talk about social media. If you want to find us on Twitter, you can do so at TPSMTG.
You could send us an email at turnpapersideways@gmail.com. Send us love mail, hate mail, or complaints about not being able to put your shocklands into the battlefield untapped because you've only got 2 life left.
Oh, did that happen to you?
No.
Oh, okay. But that's
but
something
it might
that
happen to someone.
Happen to you now because shocklands are easily accessible. You can find us on YouTube by searching Turn Paper Sideways.
You could support us by giving us 5-star ratings on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/turnpapersideways. And donating as little as $1 an episode there goes a really long way in keeping the good content coming. And we are super grateful to all of our patrons.
Beyond grateful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, they make this possible. So how's your week going, Tim? What's been happening?
Harry, in the last 2 weeks, I've played Magic with real paper cards. Twice.
Amazing. Which is a increase on your normal amount of about 200%.
I mean, but 0 times 200 is still 0. I had a good time. Went to see my brother in Norwich, and I played with my new neighbour, because I've moved house and it's the best.
Amazing.
And I played against my brother. He was playing his Atraxa deck, and I played my new Saheeli Artifacts deck, which is bonkers. It was probably the best game of Magic we've ever had. I literally said out loud, I do not use the word literally lightly, out loud, I need a card with Convoke, because I needed to be able to tap my creatures so that they could deal damage using Throne of the God Pharaoh. Is that the one that deals damage for tapped creatures?
Oh, amazing.
But I couldn't attack because he had all the blockers. So I need something with Convoke. And I drew the Convoke Artifact Tutor, which let me go and get Mirage Mirror, which let me turn it into another Throne of the God of Pharaoh to kill him for Xaxes, because he managed to deal with some of my creatures.
That's incredible. It
was the most intense 2 minutes of just solid looking at my card thinking, what is in this deck? And then I was like, oh my gosh, I've got artifact that turns into any artifact. I'm so excited. So yeah,
amazing.
It like the game, because the next turn he was like, if you don't win this turn, I'm going to win. And we were talking about how he was going to win, and I was guessing what he might do. And it was, you've probably just attacking me with all these creatures that he got because Atraxa's stupid. But yeah, it was real life Magic, and it was bonkers close. It was so good.
I'm so glad, because you don't get to play that often. I feel bad saying, I had another great night playing EDH tonight.
But yeah, the game I had with my neighbour as well, James, he has pimped decks, and he's never made monocolour look so good. He played Jamuura, and 3 Jamuura triggers in a row. He gets non-legendary Annihilator Eldrazi out, so no one else had permanents. It was a sight to behold.
Boy. I got annihilated this week. I was playing at a local club, and I went out of my way to destroy someone's Omniscience. I cast Merciless. The only enchantment on the table was Omniscience, and this is a bit stupid because I had Crows and Grip in hand, but I cast Merciless Eviction, naming enchantments. And in response, he cast Venser to bounce Merciless Eviction back to my hand. So I thought, great, I've still got 6 mana open. I'll cast Merciless Eviction again. And that time I did blow up his Omniscience, and all was well. But I kept the Crows and Grip because Crows and Grip says destroy and Merciless Eviction says exile, and I wanted Omniscience gone for good. I didn't want him to recur it because I know that his deck is built around it. And before the game even started, he said, "This is my Omniscience tribal deck." So I went out of my way to get rid of it. And so on his next turn, he was playing Joda, and he Joda'd out a original Ulamog with Annihilator 4, and proceeded to attack me 2 turns in a row. Luckily, the rest of the table realised that having me out of the game was not going to be good for their chance of beating him, and so between us, we all managed to get rid of that guy together.
Yes.
And it was quite good. It was a good sort of a battle against a really powerful board state.
That's fantastic.
I did not win that game because I had to sacrifice 8 lands.
That's
quite.
You don't come back from that.
No,
you don't come back
just
from that.
do not. But I love that you got to play with Throne of the Godpharaoh. That's a card that I've been wanting to get to work for ages. And
it's so good. If you have a Saheeli deck, it goes in that deck because you make so many tokens, and you're going to want to attack with them, and then Convoke. You don't even have to attack with them to deal damage. It's beautiful. That deck is bonkers good. And looking at the cards I'd played afterwards, so the lands I had, the cards I had in my hand and graveyard and on the battlefield, not many of them weren't in the precon. That deck is really good.
Oh, amazing. Tim, would you like to do the news now?
Yes, I would. So for the news this week, I have some non-Magic related news. I'm sorry, everybody. Please don't turn off. Please carry on listening. I promise we'll talk about Magic. So I play a game called the X-Wing Miniatures game. It's basically Warhammer, but Star Wars, and you don't have to make the figurines yourself. They're all come pre-painted.
Tim's hobby is having hobbies.
Yes, my hobby is having not enough money to fund all of my hobbies. It's because I spend all my money on other hobbies.
Sure.
Magic took a hit this month because the new version of X-Wing came out. So X-Wing 2.0, they've rebooted the game. All of the cards and cardboard and tokens and everything you own from that game, except for the models, is now completely redundant. And some kind Redditor sent me a complete collection of every card and bit of cardboard from the first edition of the game. It's that obsolete now. Someone just given away what was 4 months ago hundreds of pounds worth of stuff for free because they don't want it anymore. It's insane.
That's a big deal.
It is a big deal.
That could potentially break the game.
So I was listening to a lot of podcasts of people talking about this. So apparently, this is fascinating. I won't talk about this too long because this is a Magic podcast. 75% of people who play this game, or people who buy this game, don't play it. They just buy it for the models.
Oh, okay.
So the reboot is just for the 25%. And they've done it better than most figure games. I don't know what they're called. Miniatures games. That's what literally in the title of the game. They've given conversion kits, basically. You still have to buy them, but they convert all your old collection into the new version of the game. You obviously still have to pay it. It's £35-ish per faction, and they're bringing out more factions. So it is kind of an exit point for the game, but it's also a brilliant entry point because the game's just much simpler, much better, much faster. Because I've been listening to a lot of this and I've been hearing a lot about other card games, it's made me realise how good Magic is and how good Wizards are in terms of how they keep the game alive and stop the game from becoming unbelievably stale and unplayable. So I think it's Destiny. So forgive me if I'm getting the wrong card game.
Star Wars Destiny is the TCG.
Yeah, and there's another Star Wars game that I might be getting this mixed up with, but either way, they haven't heard any news of this game for months. Imagine if Wizards didn't say anything about the game for months. The world would explode. So it made me realise, people love to moan about Wizards, but they do a really good job of continuing to talk to us and let us know about what products are coming out and when they're coming out, kind of years in advance as well. Maybe we don't know what set's coming out in 2 years, but we know that a set's coming out in 2 years, and we don't have to think, is the meta are we just gonna have the same cards for 6 months without any change? So be thankful, Magic players, that you at least have kind of a little bit of a security net in your game.
Yeah, and this is actually something we spoke to about Gavin, and something that's come up on Twitter since we released that episode with Gavin Verhey. There's been a bit of backlash in our Twitter thread, people who don't like Brawl, and I think it's actually really something that is commendable about Wizards is that they really support the way that players want to play. And so EDH, for example, is a format which was started by a group of guys just playing on their own, and it became really popular because it's good,
Yeah.
And so now Wizards are supporting it actively. We've got the Commander set release every year. They are actively designing towards that. That's something that we talked about with Gavin. They're designing for Commander and multiplayer formats.
Yeah.
And somebody designed Brawl, and although Brawl is not, I don't think it will ever be as popular as Commander, it's a fantastic way for people to play budget Magic, and Wizards are supporting that. It's not Brawl, honestly, I think is not a way for Wizards to make a lot of money, but they are supporting the player base by giving them things that they want to play with, and it's not going to make them as much money as Draft or whatever. But I think it's really commendable that Wizards listen to the players and also communicate with them. There's a conversation there always. I mean, the Wizards staff are so vocal on Twitter and other platforms about what they're doing, and they love to interact with the players, and I think that is awesome. So although I'm dubious about the X-Wing update and what it means for a game, because I really do, that's quite a dangerous, it's a very bold move.
It is, yeah.
I do hope for your sake that it works, but I mean, it does just show how incredible it is that Magic's been going for 25 years and they've never had to do anything like that.
Yeah, the game hasn't become, and I am directly talking about X-Wing and Magic now, so Magic hasn't become a game where you know exactly what you're going to see at every single tournament.
Yeah.
People are playing things that they don't actually enjoy, but they've got to play them if they want to win. And people aren't bored. The game isn't hemorrhaging players. People still want to play Magic, and the player base is growing, and there was a risk that with X-Wing it just became a bit boring and stale, and the new figures they're bringing out have all got moving parts now, so that's good. Well, the ships that do. So like the X-Wings open and close now, which is cool.
I have played a bit of X-Wing with Tim, and I will say that it's a really enjoyable game. If you're into Magic and if you like Star Wars, X-Wing is actually quite a fun game. Obviously, it'll change now with the update, so maybe you'll report back. Who knows? Tim might start an X-Wing podcast, so we don't have to spend so long talking about it on our Magic podcast. But,
probably not, but thanks. I think we should get on to the main topic, Harry.
Before we get into the main topic, I've got one more little piece of news.
Let's hear it.
This is, so last episode, Tim told everybody I'd be live tweeting the draft that I was going to, and so that meant that I had to be live tweeting, even though that you would have listened to the podcast after the draft. But anyway, this is my piece of news for the week, that Guilds of Ravnica is definitely the best limited format I've ever played. It's fantastic. I had so much fun in the draft. It helped that I was the only Golgari player at the table. That was that was wonderful. So I got like a 6th pick Izoni. It was amazing.
What?
Yeah, that nobody else was picking Golgari. So a creature with green, black in its mana cost is tough. Nobody wanted it. So I got that. I got 9 different removal spells, including one on the creature, the Affectionate Indrik, which is an absolute house in limited. Had a great evening. Really fun playing Magic. We played with new players, people who hadn't come to the store before, so new players to the store. Really good, and in the end I won with 3 wins and no losses, and so I felt pretty good. That's the first time I've ever done that at draft, so
that's so good.
That's so good. I don't, I'm not into bragging and bigging myself up, but it's nice to sort of see some payoff from spending so much time thinking about Magic. So if you get a chance, go out and play Guilds of Ravnica in draft, or Sealed's good. Did that at the pre-release. It's great, but draft it's amazing. It's so well balanced. It's really, really good. Kudos to Gavin and the rest of the team. Gavin said that he loves this draft format, and I think he is quite right to.
You and one of the main designers at Magic are in agreement there. Let's get on to the main topic. I'm really excited to hear about this deck, Harry. We're going to do a deck, and it's going to be so good.
Oh, I'm really excited about this as well. It's actually a deck which you were talking about Throne of the Godpharaoh. This is a deck in transition. I'm still building this deck, and you mentioned Throne of the Godpharaoh, and I realised that could go in this deck, and so you'll find out, listeners, why that is the case. But this is probably one of my favourite decks that I have built. I don't play it very often. It is intentionally quite janky. I have been quite intentional about not including cards that I put in other decks, so it doesn't have all the EDH staples. I don't even think it's got a soul ring in it. It is
nice.
Yeah, I've tried to stay away from everything I put into other decks. So all the powerhouse removal, that's not there. All the powerhouse graveyard recursion, not there. And so I'm relying on cards which don't quite make the cut. So it's what I call tier 2 cards. And so you'll see some of those as we go through. But this is my quirky deck, and it's actually inspired by a friend of mine who I play with quite a lot. He's got some really exciting decks, and so I pinched little ideas from each of those decks, and some of the commanders are in this deck as part of the 99.
Okay.
But the main inspiration for this deck is his deck, which deals combat damage. And so the commander for this deck is Sidar Kondo of Jamuura. He is 2 green-white for a legendary human knight. He is a 2/5 with flanking, and that means whenever a creature without flanking blocks him, the blocking creature gets -1/-1. But the key thing is that he says creatures your opponents control without flying or reach can't block creatures with power 2 or less.
Nice. And you have certainly built around this. I think I've played against this deck once when you visited a month ago-ish.
I think so, yeah.
It was fun then, and I imagine a month later it's even more fun. But it's not just 2 colours, is it?
No, so when you played it, it was 3 colours, and the second partner was Cadell, Chosen of Crufix, which is 2 green-blue for a legendary creature, which it's got tap, add colourless to your mana pool for each card you've drawn this turn. So that was great, and you'll see why that was a good choice as we go on through. There's a lot of card draw in the deck, and a quite specific way of doing it. But now, because I wanted to include red, I have included Ludovic Necro Alchemist as the other partner commander. He is 1 blue and a red for a legendary human wizard. He's a 1/4, and he says at the beginning of each player's end step, that player may draw a card if a player other than you lost life this turn. And so Sidar and Ludovic are a great partnership, because I am going to swing in with little creatures and deal combat damage, which means that in my end step, I'm going to draw a card.
And then it's each player's end step, so even if other people attacked other people, Ludovic gets triggered.
Yeah, so that's actually really important, because I'm planning on attacking with my creatures. I'm not going to have as many blockers, and it's a little deterrent for people to steer their creatures towards other players.
So obviously your deck is built around Sidar Kondo, kind of getting your small creatures through. Ludovic getting payoffs for that. But there are a couple other cards that the deck is built around as well.
Yeah, so Edric, Spymaster of Trest, is an incredibly popular commander for good reason. He's 1 green-blue for a legendary elf rogue. He's a 2/2, so there's that magic 2 number again. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller may draw a card. And so this, again, it just encourages my opponents to attack each other and not me. The other card is Bident of Thassa, and this was mentioned in it was in our Pet Rares episode, I think, wasn't it? This is one of my favourite cards, and so I had to include it in the deck. It's basically what the deck is built around. It's 2 blue for a legendary enchantment artifact. It says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may draw a card, and then for 1 and a blue you can tap it, and it says creatures your opponents control attack this turn if able. So the plan is to be dealing combat damage and drawing cards. And so we've got loads of creatures with power 2 or less, which also say draw cards on them. Yeah. Generally, they're blue. Generally, I think all of these in this list cost 3 mana. There's a green one, but there's a whole load of them. So the first one is Cold-Eyed Selkie. This is a creature with Island Walk. It's a 1/1, and it says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw that many cards.
So if you can pump it after it's not been blocked, you can draw way more than 1 card.
Oh, yes.
So you got Eternal of Harsh Truths, which has Afflict 2, and draw a card when it's not blocked, which it never will be.
That's it. There's Jessian Thief, which is a 1/3 with Prowess. Also just says when it deals combat damage, draw a card. You've got to be a bit careful with this one, because if you cast too many non-creature spells during your first main phase, it won't have power 2 or less. So you've got a limit of 1 if you want Jessian Thief to attack unabashed with Sidar's help.
You got Marchese's Infiltrator, which is a 1/1 with Dethrone. Dethrone being if it attacks the player with the highest life, it gets a 1/1 counter.
That is exactly right. Yes.
Nice.
So again, you can do this once.
Yeah, you have to be careful who you attack with this.
Like I said, this is janky and it's not good.
Okay. We've also got Neurot Commando, which is a 2/1 with Shroud.
There's Ninetail White Fox, which is quite a boring little one, but it does say when it deals combat damage, draw a card.
Ninja of the Deep Hours, everyone's favourite ninja. It costs 4 normally, but it's got ninjutsu for 1 and a blue, so you can swap it for another creature, and that draws a card when it hits you.
Yeah, and that's really useful because there are loads of utility creatures in the deck, and there are actually some brilliant enter the battlefield effects on creatures, and so Ninja of the Deep Hours just accrues incremental value there when you, for example, if you bounce your Acidic Slime, so you cast the Acidic Slime, destroy something, and then next turn you can attack with the Acidic Slime, and Ninja of the Deep Hours in, draw a card, and then you can cast the Acidic Slime later. Just little incremental bits of value. That's what this deck is built around. There's also Oran Viper, which is the green one. It's 1 green, and it's got old school Death Touch as well as drawing a card when it deals combat damage. There's also Scroll Thief. Fairly simple, no exciting effects, but it does draw a card when it deals combat damage. There's a bit of a joke in my playgroup that it's whenever Chris, the guy who's got the deck, which is quite similar to this, it's all about. It's just all card drawing. It's all creatures which deal combat damage when they draw a card. So that this part of the deck is really inspired by him. And there's a bit of a joke, which is whenever he plays anything, you ask, "What does that say? What does that do?" And he just sort of smiles and nods. Because everything just says, draw a card.
Draw a card.
So I've been able to adopt that. But it's not just card draw we want to do. We want to do other fun things. We want to get other 2/2s through which do cool things when they deal combat damage. So Tim, why don't you read this first one?
So yeah, we got Centaur Rootcaster for 3 and a green. It's a Centaur Druid for 2. It's a 2/2. And it says... let me just say that it's a 2/2, which means if Sidar's out, doesn't get blocked.
Amazing.
It says whenever Centaur Rootcaster deals combat damage to a player, you may search your library for a basic land card and put that into play, tapped, and then shuffle your library. This ramp, but it goes with your theme of the deck. This is brilliant.
We've also got One with Nature, which is an enchantment. It's an aura for 1 green mana. It says, whenever enchanted creature deals combat damage to a player, you may search your library for a basic land card and put that card into play tapped and then shuffle your library. So it's like build your own Centaur Rootcaster. There's also the
it's
equipment.
Got a center on it as well.
It does. So even better. This one is perhaps a staple, but it's so on theme, I couldn't let it go. It's Sword of the Animist. It's an equipment for 2 generic mana, and it's a legendary artifact. It's an equipment. It says equipped creature gets +1/+1. So again, you've got to be a little bit careful which creature you put that on, because that buff could ruin your day. But it says when it deals, whenever the equipped creature attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. It equips for 2 mana, and these 3 cards are basically the all-stars of the deck. I haven't yet played this deck where it doesn't ramp amazingly. You know, it's got the normal ramp package, but having even just one of these on the battlefield is amazing. Nobody wants to remove a Centaur Rootcaster. Why would they bother? It's so small and insignificant. It's only getting you 1 basic land per turn. But then they look down on turn 8 and you've got 14 lands out. And suddenly that's a problem.
The dream. Man, you don't think, oh, you got to remove the guy's ramp, because that just feels bad. But, I mean, you remove the Ulamog or the big Eldrazi, but not the little guy. It's a 2/2. It's a Centaur. It's just getting him basic lands. I mean, that's no good.
Exactly, and that is a bit of a theme of this deck as well. All of the creatures are sort of, you look at them and they're a bit rubbish. There's nothing in the deck which is known as a sort of a power card, which means that it doesn't draw too much hate so far. When my playgroup listen to this, that might change. Hearing me laughing with glee about it.
I imagine that the Sidar Kondo is a bit of a lightning rod, because he's a 2/5, so he's not a lightning rod in that lightning bolt doesn't kill him, but he's still kind of he turns the deck on in a sort of way, so you kind of need to get rid of that. I don't think so far it's been the target of targeted removal. Maybe don't tell your friends about this episode.
Maybe not.
So we've also got Trigon Predator, which is 1 green blue for a 2/3 beast. It's got flying, and it says whenever Trigon Predator deals combat damage to a player, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment that player controls. It cannot be overstated. It cannot be overstated how good this sort of card is in a deck like this.
Yeah, and we've also got Caustic Wasps, which is 2 green for a 1/1 with flying, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may destroy target artifact that player controls. These are, they're incredible. But it's just so nice to be able to find artifact and enchantment removal, which is on theme.
Yeah, big time. It feels good.
Yeah, definitely. I think these next 4 are some of my favourite creatures to play out. The first one is Thada Adel Acquisitor. 1 blue for a legendary Merfolk Rogue. It's a 2/2 with Island Walk. It's always nice to have extra evasion, just in case Sidar Kondo isn't out. But it says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you may search that player's library for an artifact card and exile it. Then that player shuffles his or her library. Until end of turn, you may play that card. It basically reads, go and get everyone's Soul Ring.
And then get their really big stuff next.
Yeah, exactly.
And because it's got Island Walk, this obviously works perfectly with Sidar, but if you haven't got Sidar Kondo out, there's going to be a player playing blue, and then this just becomes unblockable.
Usually an island at the table somewhere.
Yeah, that makes a big difference.
Yeah.
We've also got Daxos of Meletis. This is actually the first deck in EDH I played against, which is pretty sweet.
Cool.
1 white blue for a 2/2 legendary creature, human soldier, and it can't be blocked by creatures with power 3 or greater. So again, it's got its own evasion, but it also ties in with Sidar Kondo as well because it's a 2/2. And it says whenever Daxos of Meletis deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of that player's library. You gain life equal to that card's converted mana cost, and until end of turn, you may cast that card, and you can spend mana of any colour to cast it.
So this is weirdly a card which gets so much hate in my playgroup. So Chris actually has a Daxos of Meletis deck, so shout out to Chris again for that. And he finds that Daxos draws more hate than some of his really powerful decks because people just do not like having their stuff stolen. Thada Adel gets hate for the same reason, but Daxos is just sort of so... I don't know. It feels so horrible that you're just taking. It's the next card. It's what I am.
Yeah.
I deserve to draw that card. Why are you taking it away from me?
Yeah, it doesn't make a difference whether they take the top card, the bottom card, or the one in the middle. It's the fact that you know that if they didn't do that, you'd have got that card, and it hurts.
Yeah. The next card is Derevi Imperial Tactician. It's green, white, and blue for a legendary bird wizard. It's a 2/3 with flying, and it says whenever Derevi enters the battlefield or a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may tap or untap target permanent. So this, it's also got 1 green, white, and blue. You can put Derevi onto the battlefield from the command zone. That is irrelevant because Derevi is not my commander, but
yet.
Well, so this actually did start as a Derevi deck, and then I thought,
cool.
Sidar Kondo is so much better. So Derevi is so good because it says whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you can untap or tap target permanent. A lot of people build sort of stacks decks or combo decks around Derevi, but I just decided that I would include Derevi in order to gain a little bit more value. And so if I've got 2, 3, 4, 5 creatures dealing combat damage to my opponents, I'm going to untap that many lands. And so if I can untap 4 or 5 lands and have basically an extra turn...
just without the combat step, it's brilliant.
Exactly. The value there is amazing. And so that means I can cast Derevi, untap a land, deal combat damage with 2 creatures, and still be able to cast another spell in my second main phase after the creatures have dealt combat damage.
That's sweet. And this goes really, really well with a card that we're not going to talk about yet. We'll talk about it in a minute. But this combo is sweet, Harry. And you don't normally see it because they're different colours. I'm really excited about this.
Hint, it's Relentless Assault. What's the next one? This is the last in my sort of 4 pet cards from the deck.
So this is Tana the Bloodsower. It's 2 red-green for a 2/2 elf druid. This is another one of the partner commanders. So it says trample. And whenever Tana the Bloodsower deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green sapling creature tokens. So it's a 2/2, which makes it unblockable with Sidar out. It makes 2 saplings, but if you can pump it, Harry... Do you have pump spells in the deck?
You will find out in the win cons section how we're going to pump the creatures, and it is so exciting.
Okay.
Spoilers all over the place here.
So what's the next kind of category area? What's the next
there
cards?
are just a few more creatures which do cool things, like Spawn Writhe, which is 2 green for a 2/2 trample elemental, which says whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of Spawn Writhe. So in Magical Christmas Land, this gets out of control and you have 1 million Spawn Writhes. But in reality, you might have 2 or 4 Spawn Writhes on the table. There's also Imara, Soul of the Accord, brand new card from Guilds of Ravnica. It's green and white for a 2/2, and it says whenever Imara, Soul of the Accord becomes tapped, create a 1/1 white soldier creature token with lifelink. And so there is a bit of a token sub-theme with Tana there and Imara. It's good to have a few tokens lying around because that's more creatures that can deal combat damage. So if you've got Bident of Thassa or Edric out, you're going to draw more cards. So that's a nice bonus, just having a few sort of incidental tokens. But Imara's a good way of getting there because she's protected. Imara decks are sort of being brewed at the moment, which are focusing on having alternative ways to tap Imara rather than going to combat. But in this deck, you don't care. You go to combat, you tap her, you get a token, and she comes home scot-free because Sidar Kondo lets her get through. So
that's fantastic.
Yeah, again, just lovely little interaction there that lets Imara get away with it.
We spoiled this card moments ago. Relentless Assault. 2 red for Relentless Assault is a sorcery. It says untap all creatures that attack this turn. After this main phase, there is an additional combat phase followed by an additional main phase. So attack again with all the creatures that you just attacked with. And with Derevi out, that's untapping all your lands twice. With Imara, that's creating an extra token. With Spawn Writhe, that's creating another token. With Daxos, that's stealing another card. With Tana, it's making more things. And with all the drawing, that's just drawing more cards. So Relentless Assault is a big deal. Do you win with Relentless Assault? Does that ever happen? Or is it just a get you going?
This is more so you can set up your winning turn.
Yeah.
So
okay, yeah.
Relentless Assault, if you set it up correctly, it should read 4 mana to draw an extra 4 cards and put 2 more tokens out or something like that. It's a card to gain a little bit more value off what you've already got on the battlefield. So rather than being a game-winning card to swing for the win, I mean, it absolutely could be that, but I'm focusing more on the fact that it's a good cost to just to get more value, draw more cards, get more tokens, get to the winning position faster, I think is what Relentless Assault is there for.
So the opposite of the next card.
Exactly.
Sort of.
So Chance for Glory, another new card from Guilds of Ravnica. So I haven't played this one yet. I have put it in the deck. I'm just going to try it out and see how it is. It's 1 red and white for an instant. It says creatures you control gain indestructible. Period. Great. Take an extra turn after this one. Amazing. That's what we like, especially for 3 mana. It also says at the beginning of that turn's end step, you lose the game. So this card is absolutely to give me another attack step in order to win. The only reason I would cast this is that I think if I was just allowed 1 more attack step, I would win.
Yeah.
If I'm uninterrupted, I've got the game here. So that's what Chance for Glory is for. I'm going to give it a go, see how it works. I might end up taking it out in favour of something else, but yeah.
I think the important thing to note is this is an instant, so you can cast this on someone else's turn. If you think, I don't want that person who's going to go next to have a chance because they might wipe my board, I'm going to win now so that they don't get a chance to stop me.
Or in response to a board wipe. Because creatures I control gain indestructible. If somebody casts a board wipe, I can use it and then go, actually, now I can try and win. Who knows? There are not infinite, but a few uses for this.
Rules question: if you cast another extra turn spell after casting Chance for Glory, does that extra turn go before or after the turn that makes you lose the game?
That is very interesting. I don't know. We'll check that with a judge. The next card, this is one of my favourites. Do you want to read it?
Yeah, Archetype of Imagination. 4 blue for a 3/2 enchantment creature, human wizard. Before I read it, if your opponent plays this, you turn off Harry's deck. It says creatures you control have flying, and creatures your opponents control lose flying and can't gain flying. This is really good.
So this is in here because Sidar Kondo says creatures without flying or reach can't block. And so this is sort of a safety net card so Fantastic. That when you are playing against opponents with lots of flyers, you can still get through.
Yeah, that's cool.
Because it doesn't matter if Sidar Kondo's out if all of your creatures have flying and nobody else's do.
Yeah.
Because they're going to get through anyway. So yeah, this is sort of the just in case panic button.
Is there an archetype of reach? Or a card that does a similar thing?
No, I don't think so. Not for reach. No. I might be wrong, but I don't think there is.
If there is one, we want to know about it because that would be obscure.
Yeah, definitely.
So we've also got Windborne Muse, which is 3 and a white for a 2/3 spirit. It's got flying, and it says creatures can't attack you unless their controller plays 2 for each creature he or she controls. So this is like a ghostly prison that can attack. And if Sidar Kondo's out, can't be blocked.
Exactly. And if all of our creatures are attacking, like we mentioned earlier, you just want things that stop your opponents from being able to attack you. If I've got no blockers left, then this is an excellent card to have on the battlefield just to stop the crackback. The next one is Teshar, Ancestor's Apostle, and I loved it when I found this one. I got so excited. It's 3 and a white for a legendary creature, Bird Cleric. It's a 2/2 with flying, and it says whenever you cast a historic spell, return target creature card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. As you have noticed so far, there are a lot of historic spells. So artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic. There are no sagas in the deck. There are quite a lot of artifacts, and there are tons of legendary creatures.
Yeah, they really are. Just scrolling back through the list, I reckon half the cards we've read have been legendary creatures.
Yeah, and we haven't even mentioned all of them. But the wonderful thing about this is, in EDH, we've always got access to legendary creatures. So if needs be, you've got a way to get a card back from the graveyard. But it comes back to the battlefield, which is excellent.
We've also got another legendary creature, Hua Tuo. I think I said that right. Honoured Physician. 1 green. I added that bit, by the way. That's not his full name. Hua Tuo. I think I said that right. Honoured Physician. He is a 1/2 legendary creature, human, and it says tap. Put target creature card from your graveyard on top of your library. Activate this ability only during your turn before attackers are declared. Why is this in the deck?
So this goes back to the fact that the deck is for janky and weird cards, and this is a card that I like, but it's got to be done before attackers are declared, and I've got lots of cards which say when it deals combat damage, draw a card. So in my first main phase, or at the start of combat, whenever, I tap this, get a card that I want on top of my library, and then when I deal combat damage, I get to draw it. So it's sort of super janky graveyard recursion.
And my favourite thing about this deck, you've got Derevi out, and you cast Relentless Assault. You can do this twice.
No, it's got to be before attackers are declared. So what I can do is I can tap this, then cast Derevi, untap this, and do it twice. Yes.
Boom.
And then deal combat damage with 2 cards which say they're going to draw a card when you deal combat damage, and then you draw them and cast them again later. Yep.
I can't wait to play against this deck again, Harry. So what else? You've got some other cards, kind of categories. What? Do you want to walk us through those?
Yeah, just really quickly, there are a couple of on-theme board wipes. There's Solar Tide and Dusk to Dawn. Both of those care about the power of the creatures that they're getting rid of. So Solar Tide, you can choose, it's an entwine card, you can choose to get rid of either creatures with power 3 or greater or creatures with power 2 or less, and you can entwine it to do both. I think the entwine cost is sacrifice 2 lands, but obviously I'm just going to choose to get rid of all creatures with power 3 and greater. Dusk to Dawn does just that. It says destroy all creatures with power greater than 2, I think. But then Dawn says return all creatures with power 2 or less from the graveyard to your hand.
So good. So there's Austere Command as well, which isn't as good because I think it's power 4.
It is. It's also a staple card, so it can't go in the deck because it's in another one of my decks.
Fantastic. Okay. And you've also got a small token theme.
Yeah, so like we mentioned earlier, it's just great to have tokens out to deal combat damage, to draw cards, and Assemble the Legion is a very good way of getting hold of those tokens. So it's basically it's 5 mana, it's 3 red and white for an enchantment. It sits on the battlefield. At the beginning of your upkeep, you put a muster counter on it, and then you create as many tokens as it has muster counters on it. So by the time it goes around the table a couple of times, you're starting to create quite a lot of tokens.
And it's muster, not mustard, as every single time I ever hear anyone talk about that card, I think they're saying mustard tokens. I think I might buy some Hellman's, not Hellman's mustard. Who makes mustard?
Coleman's of Norwich.
No, they're not in Norwich anymore though. They moved. But,
I don't know how I feel about that.
That we'll talk about that on our mustard podcast. But yeah, we should get some lids, and you could use those for the mustard counters.
Yeah, maybe. Anyway, condiments aside, we've got some win cons to talk about. We want to know how this deck wins.
So this one is really, really fun. Jazal Goldmane, 2 white for a 4/4 legendary creature, cat warrior, with first strike. And I said 4/4. That's right. This is not unblockable with Sidar Kondo out, but it doesn't matter because it also says 3 white as a cost for an ability. Attacking creatures you control get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of attacking creatures. This means amazing. If you attack with 5, you can pay 5 to give them all +5/+5. Yeah. If you have 10 mana, you can give them +10/+10. If you have 15 mana, and so on. This card is sweet.
Mirror Entity is a similar one. This is 2 and a white for a creature shapeshifter. It's a 1/1. It's a changeling, and it has an activated ability for X. So until end of turn, creatures you control have base power and toughness XX and gain all creature types. So if you have 10 spare mana, you can pay 10 and make all of your creatures 10/10s. This is the real card that the deck is centered around. So this is what I'm trying to get to. This is the win con that I most want to do, and it's because this is so Chris has a deck which is entirely built around Mirror Entity, and so it's sort of a tribal deck. So it's various cards which care about weird, quirky tribes like rebels and rogues and squirrels, and so he can make them all creature types. The commander is, I think it's Sliver Hivelord or Sliver Queen, the one which gives all slivers +1/+1.
Oh, and they all get that because they're all slivers if you make them all slivers. Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and so cool. With other effects he can, so it's an amazing deck, and I'd really like at some point to feature it because it's a work of art, and it all works off activated abilities. So you can interact with so little of it. You can't counter it. If you remove stuff, he can just activate abilities in response. It's amazing. So Mirror Entity is what his deck is built around, and so of course I had to, being my deck being inspired by Chris, I should say that sometimes it's kind of a little bit fun just to troll him by playing all of his cards against him, but so I had to include Mirror Entity, but it is a fantastic win condition. Jazal and Mirror Entity do this in the same way, so creatures can't get through if they've got power 2 or more before combat. So there are very few buff spells which will do it after blockers have been declared. You need it to be on an instant spell, and there aren't any good giant growths on instants or overruns even on instants. They're all sorceries, and there are very few activated abilities. These are basically the only two. They're the only two really good ones. So what you do is you activate this after blockers have been declared, and suddenly your creatures are they're unblocked and they're gigantic, and so you just win the game by attacking with 8 10/10s or whatever you do.
This next one I really love. This is the sort of win con I really enjoy. Is Psychosis Crawler. It's 5 mana for an artifact creature horror, star, and its power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand, and you're drawing cards every turn because that's your whole strategy, which is brilliant. So it's a big creature, which means it doesn't get the whole unblockable thing. Maybe sometimes it does if you're not doing it properly, but it also says whenever you draw a card, each opponent loses 1 life, which basically says whenever a creature you control hits someone, they also lose an additional life, which is pretty fun.
Much. Yeah, some of the most explosive turns I've had with this deck, I have drawn 12 cards, or sometimes with Relentless Assault out or something like that. I think I've drawn as many as 24 cards in a turn, which, if you've got Psychosis Crawler out, is a big deal.
Yeah, this is really cool. You don't think, oh well, you're already attacking, but because all your creatures are 1/1s or 2/2s, it is small advantage. This is basically a buff. You're giving all your creatures +1/+1 without giving them +1/+1.
I'd never thought of it like that. That's nice.
+1/+0. Sorry,
yeah,
it's a bit worse.
Yeah, I guess.
But yeah, still.
Oh, good work.
I like this a lot.
There's also Quietus Spike, and so in building this deck, I wanted to find equipment which didn't give a buff to the creatures. So Sword of the Animist is sort of the exception there, but there aren't many equipments which don't give any buff that really matter. There are some things which give +0/+3, for example. I don't care about that. I don't want my creatures to have more toughness. That doesn't matter. I want them to have interesting effects when they deal combat damage, and there are not many of them at all. But there is this one. It's Quietus Spike for 3 mana. It's an artifact equipment. Equipped creature has Death Touch. Okay, that's quite cool. But it also says, whenever equipped creature deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half of his or her life, rounded up, and it equips for 3 mana. Oh boy.
Can you choose to... So say I attack you with 2 creatures, they're both 1/1s, and you're on 40 life. Do I choose which one hits you first?
No, so creatures deal combat damage simultaneously, and then all of the deals combat damage triggers go on the stack in the order that you choose.
Okay, so they lose half their life after taking damage.
Exactly, yes.
Okay, fine. That makes sense, because that's literally what it says on the card. So
yeah, there we go. So this basically just greases the wheels, gets you closer to beating down your opponents. If you can hit each person at the table with this once, suddenly you don't have to deal as much combat damage with your big swing to end the game.
That's fantastic.
Or if you've got Psychosis Crawler out, suddenly you're a bit closer to your explosive turn is going to kill them much more easily.
Yeah, something we didn't actually say about Psychosis Crawler, which I've just realised, is it's each opponent. So you hit one of them, the one you can hit, and then they all take it. So it's
yeah, of course.
This is seriously good. And with Quietus Spike, you half that guy's life, and then you draw a bunch of cards, and then they're dead, and you half someone else's life. Yeah, this is. You say this deck is janky, but when it works, this is fun magic. This is fun.
Yeah, I think this is fun and fair, and it's
fair, definitely fair.
When it works, it does pretty cool things, and it can be quite explosive, but none of the cards are renowned for being particularly powerful, so it relies on a lot of cogs being in motion before it does what it really wants to do.
Which just feels good.
Yeah, it's Magical Christmas Land in a deck.
Yeah. There's a couple more... I say it's Magical Christmas Land, but these cards, they combo so nicely. Maybe it's not Magical Christmas Land, it's just good deck building. What are these?
So this is a combo which I have got out once before, and I really love small combos, things which it's not an infinite combo, it doesn't win you the game, but just 2 or more cards which interact in a really interesting way. And so this is one that I wanted to highlight, and there are several in each of my decks which I've found, and I'd love to include more of these in the podcast and be able to share these interesting interactions with you. But this one is Daring Thief. It's 2 and a blue for a 2/3 human rogue with Inspired. And Inspired is a mechanic which we don't see a lot of in EDH. I know you've sort of tried to include as many Inspired cards as possible, Tim, because you quite like it. But because Inspired is to do with untapping, it's quite difficult to get it to work. So it says, whenever Daring Thief becomes untapped, you may exchange control of target non-land permanent you control and target permanent an opponent controls that shares a card type with it. So that's really difficult to get it to work in most decks, because what's the way you get things to tap? You attack with them, and it's only a 2/3, which means that it's not going to get through. But obviously in Sidar Kondo, this works really nicely. On your next untap step, you're going to get to untap it and exchange control or something. But there is this card in the deck as well, and this card it's sort of another safety net. I put it in there in case things went pear-shaped, so that I could still sort of attack freely, if you will. It's Reconnaissance. It's 1 white for an enchantment, and it's got an activated ability for 0 mana. It says you can remove target attacking creature you control from combat and untap it. And that means that the creature is no longer in combat. It doesn't deal combat damage or anything. But it means that if somebody says, maybe they cast, is it Ether Spouts? It says put all attacking creatures on top of their owner's library. It's an instant card.
That's it.
It means you can remove all your creatures and none of them get put on the top of your library. But with Daring Thief, the interaction here is amazing. So you attack with Daring Thief, and either before combat damage is dealt if necessary, or afterwards. You can use Reconnaissance after combat damage, and we did mention this in our Pet Uncommons episode because it's one of my favourite cards. You can sort of give your creature pseudo vigilance with it. So after combat damage is dealt, you untap Daring Thief and you exchange control of a non-land permanent you control with a permanent your opponent controls. So say they've got a nice big beefy creature, you can give them a 2/2. What are they going to do with a 2/2?
Because it's not unblockable.
Because Sidar Kondo's symmetrical, they can possibly still get through. But
that's a good note. Well done.
I can block them. So if I leave Sidar Kondo up, I've got a 2/5 blocker, so I can block that 2/2. Put it back into my graveyard. Use Hua 2/0 to put it on top of my library. Draw it when I deal combat damage to a player, and then I can cast it again. So I've got their big beefy creature and my 2/2 back. Amazing. That's brilliant.
I think it's important to note as well that Sidar Kondo is unblockable. Unless by flying or reach creatures, correct?
Yes, yeah. So he is a 2/5, and so it's
Do you
quite
ever win
often
with combat damage, commander damage even.
I haven't done. I don't think I ever aim to because I need 11 turns to get there.
I mean, if you have Giselle Goldmane out, it might be it. You kill one person with all your other creatures and another person. But
I haven't done that, but
one day.
But I could do. So that is the deck. I mean, I've got to give a real thanks to Chris for giving me the inspiration. But I did have so much fun finding interesting cards to put in this. Things like Daring Thief and Hua 2/0. Cards I'd never put in another deck. But
no, and they've got no place in other decks. But and if you made this competitive, there's potential that they don't have a place in this deck. But because this is a jank deck that just feels really good when you win, this is definitely the sort of card you want to put in this deck. It's fantastic.
There is something quickly that I would like to mention, just so you get a feel for how janky this deck is. In our Guilds of Ravnica episode last week, we talked about Circuitous Route. It's the gate explosive vegetation.
Oh, yeah.
4 mana, you go and search your library for 2 basic land cards or 2 gates. So I have got, so it's four colours, so I've got access to 6 gate lands. I've got all of them in the deck, and I've got Circuitous Route, and I'm super excited to cast Circuitous Route at some point.
That's brilliant. I mean, that's just great. I mean, who doesn't want a strictly better explosive vegetation in their deck?
Yeah, exactly. And I wouldn't ever put a Guild Gate in a deck without that. But this is the deck that I can get away with this in because it's
not, the jank
it's
deck.
Not overpowered. I haven't got shocks. I haven't got fetches. I've got really janky lands, and it just feels so right.
Do you have the slow fetches at all?
Nope.
Oh man, I think they're janky enough that if you decide to put those in, they'll fit.
I could do. I've got explosive vegetation and terramorphic expanse, but that's about as janky as it gets. That's about as fetchy as it gets.
Oh man, I just can't wait to play this deck again. I feel like it's grown a lot since I.
Yeah, I've put a lot of thought into it, and I've really enjoyed building this one.
It's sweet. I can guarantee that. I can tell you from experience, this is fun to play against as well.
Cool. I hope so.
Because you feel like, because like you said, it's fair. What Harry's doing doesn't feel bad. They're not he's not super comboing off, but if you're not careful, he's winning because he's hitting you for 3, 4, 5 a turn. If he hits you for 4 a turn for 10 turns, you're dead.
Exactly. But nobody's going to notice it because they're being attacked by 2/2s. So the hope is that it's not going to draw as much hate as, say, somebody who plays an Ulamog.
Exactly, and you're right. And it's not if you have 6 creatures that draw you a card when they hit that are unblockable out, and there's one Ulamog on the other side of the table. No one is looking at the 6 creatures because there's an Ulamog. Exactly. Doesn't matter which Ulamog, either one, any of the Eldrazi, any big creature. You are figuratively and literally, I've used that word a lot today. I apologise, everybody, but flying under the radar with this deck, because you're flying under the creatures.
Oh, yes.
They're not spotting you, and
nice.
like, emotionally and politically, people aren't really noticing you. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's really good. So I have won a couple of games with this deck. It sort of came out of nowhere, and it even caught me by surprise a bit. But I've played some games with it and not won, and I've never felt like I've done nothing. I've always felt like I've had stuff to contribute to the game, and I've interacted, and because it ramps so hard, it's able just to do a lot, and because it also draws a lot of cards, I think people can tend to forget just how powerful drawing cards is. And if I am drawing two cards a turn, doesn't feel that powerful, but drawing 2 extra cards, that means my hand is going to fill up if I can't cast 3 cards per turn. And so I mean, and there are loads of things in here just to make use of that. It's got burgeoning, because if I'm drawing lots of cards, I'm going to have lots of lands in my hand. I've made sure that I've got Reliquary Tower and Thought Vessel and ways to make sure I've got no hand size. And
have you seen Spellbook?
Yeah, zero mana, you have no maximum hand size. I haven't included that because that is all it does. Reliquary Tower and Thought Vessel also tap for mana. There's and I think it's an 8 mana green spell. I think it's 5 green, and it says you have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game, and you return your entire graveyard to your hand.
That card wins games for sure.
I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head.
I can. It's called Praetor's Council.
That's the one.
Because it's from
so
Meridian.
Things like that are good ways of making use of having no maximum hand size. I'm not so keen on the spellbook personally.
No, but let's just not forget that I remembered the card name before you.
That is actually, well done. Kudos.
Thank you, I'm very proud. Perhaps as an award, I get to take us out.
Yeah, that'll do it.
Thank you so much for listening, everybody. If you want to find us on social media, you can do so at TPSMTG.
Send us an email at turnpapersideways@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube for these details and for the deck list. You can see the show notes. We're on tappedout.net. I think it's tappedout.net/users/turnpapersideways. You can find all of the decks we've talked about so far, including Gavin's Brawl deck. That's there. This deck will be there. And as Tim and I talk about our decks, we're going to keep putting them up there. And there are, I would say, if you're interested, do go and look at it, because there are lots of interesting cards that we didn't get a chance to talk about. There's just too many interesting cards in the deck to talk about, and there's some really cool synergies in there. So if you like looking at deck lists, do go and look at this one in particular, because I really do think that there's some more gems in there.
Yeah, you're gonna enjoy it. Yeah, it's a good deck.
So Tim, as is your reward, please take us out.
Oh, you're gonna let me say the thing at the end?
Yeah, that as well.
Oh yeah. Okay. Be good. Cheerio.
The synergy here is next level.
You're listening to Sandpaper Sideways, the podcast where we talk about cardboard and rotating it. Okay, start again.
Can you be a little bit more excited? Okay, I'm stopping recording.
Okay, me too.